So you sent us quite the weather report today, specifically for Toronto on April 2nd, 2025. And honestly, looking at it, the word that comes to mind is dramatic.
Yeah.
Our mission for this deep dive is to really get under the skin of this forecast, a true weather roller coaster, and figure out what makes this particular April day so noteworthy.
Absolutely. What immediately jumps out is, well, the sheer contrast.
Hmm.
We're talking about the potential for icy conditions to start the day,
Right.
giving way to significant rainfall and maybe even a rumble of thunderstorms later on. It's not just one thing. It's a whole series packed into 24 hours.
Exactly. And it's not just a feeling. There are already two official weather alerts out. A rainfall warning and a special weather statement about possible freezing rain. Having both active on the same day, that definitely signals something out of the ordinary.
It really does. The initial observation came from Toronto Pearson, 5:00 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. The numbers themselves tell a bit of a story. Mostly cloudy, just below freezing at minus zero point 0.8 Celsius.
Oh.
But the wind chill, making it feel like a much colder -7.
Oof.
We've got an east wind, 23 kilometers per hour, gusting up to 40, humidity at 55%, and the pressure, it's actually rising, 102.9 kilopascals.
Huh. That rising pressure usually suggests things are improving, doesn't it? Seems almost like a misleading clue given what's actually heading our way.
It does, yeah. A bit counterintuitive.
Okay, so let's unpack this, starting with that potentially tricky morning commute, right? The risk of ice.
Right. And what's interesting here is how localized that risk might be. The forecast points out that while areas closer to Lake Ontario could hover just above freezing,
Mm-hmm.
the potential for freezing drizzle or rain seems higher as you move inland across the greater Toronto area, the wider region around the city.
So even if you're not seeing big fluffy snowflakes, you could still hit those incredibly slick patches of ice, the kind that turns a sidewalk into like a skating rink without warning.
Exactly.
Really makes you think about taking extra care, even if it doesn't look overtly wintry.
Precisely. That brief window of freezing precipitation, maybe just drizzle, could be enough to make surfaces pretty hazardous. The key for the morning, like you said, is definitely caution.
Slow down, yeah.
Slow down, give yourself extra travel time, and really be aware of where you're stepping or driving.
Good reminder. Now let's move into the afternoon because the forecast takes a significant turn. We shift from this icy potential to what sounds like a substantial amount of rain.
That's right. Around the noon hour, the expectation is we'll see a transition away from that freezing risk and into more sustained rainfall. The initial forecast suggests we could see maybe 10 to 15 millimeters of rain falling before we even get to nightfall.
Okay, so a decent amount to start. But then as the evening progresses, it sounds like the weather really ramps up.
Yeah, the evening forecast indicates those showers are likely to become heavier, and there's even a possibility of thunderstorms developing. This is when the bulk of the precipitation is expected. An additional 20 to 30 millimeters of rain anticipated.
And the report mentions possibly more in areas where those thunderstorms might hang around. That really suggests the potential for some, really heavy downpours in certain spots.
It does.
What kind of conditions typically lead to that sort of thunderstorm development in early April? Seems a bit early.
That's a good question. In this scenario, it's likely the interaction of a strong low-pressure system moving through
Okay.
with that slightly colder air we're seeing this morning. As warmer, more unstable air pushes in higher up, it can create the conditions needed for those more intense showers and, even thunderstorms.
Interesting. So it's this clash of air masses that's really fueling the volatility. Now, when we add up those rainfall amounts, the initial 10 to 15 millimeters, then the potential 20 to 30, plus maybe more from storms, we could be looking at totals over 50 millimeters in some areas. That's a lot of rain, especially for early April.
It is a significant amount, and it brings up a crucial point. The ground is already pretty saturated from recent wet weather.
Right. Where's all this extra water going to go? We've had our share lately, so the ground's probably not going to soak this up easily. That raises some concerns, doesn't it?
Absolutely. This increases the risk of localized flooding quite a bit. With the ground unable to absorb much more, we're very likely to see pooling on roads, especially in low-lying areas.
Yeah, those usual spots.
Exactly. It's a strong reminder for people to pay close attention and definitely avoid driving through any standing water. It's often deeper and more dangerous than it looks.
Always good advice. So something to watch for this afternoon and evening. And just when you think the day couldn't get any more interesting, the temperature overnight, expected to jump all the way up to 13 Celsius.
Yeah.
That's a massive swing from near freezing this morning. What's driving such a rapid change?
That rapid temperature increase is directly tied to that warmer air mass we mentioned earlier,
Ah,
associated with the low pressure system.
right.
As that system moves through, it pulls that warmer air in behind it pretty quickly. That leads to that big overnight jump.
It's like flipping a switch. Wow. Okay. Speaking of what comes next, Thursday sounds like we finally get a bit of a break after this very wet Wednesday.
Yes, the forecast suggests the rain will clear out fairly early on Thursday. We should see a mix of sun and clouds, although there's still a slight chance of some lingering showers, maybe around 5 millimeters, before noon.
But the main story for Thursday seems to be that much warmer temperature, 18 degrees Celsius. That'll definitely feel more like spring has finally arrived.
It really will.
Yeah,
And the southwest winds picking up 30 kilometers per hour, gusts maybe hitting 50 that'll likely add to the milder feel. It's quite the contrast to the chilly start today.
it really is. And just to round out the immediate picture, Friday's looking even better. Sunny, high of 12.
Looks that way. Sunny, high of 12 Celsius for Friday, before, the clouds roll back in with a good chance of rain on Saturday, high of 9.
So a brief taste of spring sandwiched between some more, well, typical April weather, I guess.
Which really highlights the transitional nature of this time of year, doesn't it? You can get these very different patterns following each other pretty quickly.
This all sounds quite extraordinary for early April. It makes me wonder, what does history tell us? Like, what's typical for April 2nd in Toronto?
That's a great question to put things in perspective. Historically, April 2nd in Toronto can vary quite a bit, but today's forecast certainly stands out. The record high for this date is a balmy 22.8 Celsius set way back in 1963,
Wow.
while the record low is a frosty minus 14.4 Celsius from 1924.
Big range.
Huge range. And interestingly, today's forecast kind of touches on both ends of that spectrum within a very short period, starting near that record low, at least in terms of how it feels with the wind chill,
Right, that -7 feel.
and then heading towards much milder temperatures overnight and tomorrow.
Wow, that really underscores how unusual today is. We're experiencing conditions close to both historical extremes for the date, all within basically a day.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Moving from near freezing with potential ice to a whole lot of rain,
Mhm.
then jumping to relatively mild temperatures. It really highlights the unpredictable nature of early spring.
And speaking of unpredictability, the weather report itself had that little aside. April is a trickster. Definitely feels that way today.
It's a fitting description, isn't it? And the statistic that follows really drives that home. Toronto's average rainfall for the entire month of April is around 74 millimeters.
Okay.
The fact that we could see 30 to 50 millimeters, maybe more, in just today's 24-hour period,
Okay.
that's quite remarkable. It really emphasizes the intensity of this particular system.
It really puts things into perspective. We could potentially get most of a month's worth of rain in a single day. Makes you think about the intensity and concentration of these events.
It certainly does. When you see such a large chunk of the average monthly rain falling so fast, it can have significant implications. Think about the strain on drainage infrastructure, for example,
Yeah.
and the potential for more widespread issues beyond just localized street flooding.
Okay, so for you, the listener, the big picture here is that today is far from a typical April day in Toronto.
Absolutely. The key takeaway is be prepared for a sequence of very different conditions. Mindful of potential ice this morning,
Mm-hmm.
followed by significant, potentially heavy rain this afternoon and evening, which could lead to localized flooding. It's a day that requires paying attention and adapting.
It's a perfect illustration of how quickly weather can turn, especially this time of year. We've seen a chilly start, the likelihood of a major downpour, and a big temperature swing, all pretty quickly.
And when we consider that a single day could deliver the majority of our average April rainfall, well, it does prompt a broader question, doesn't it? What are some of the wider implications of such concentrated weather events? It certainly gives you food for thought about the patterns we're observing.
Indeed. It makes you wonder about, infrastructure resilience and how we adapt to these more intense, compressed weather patterns. Definitely something to consider beyond just, what jacket to wear today.
Precisely. Encourages us to look beyond the immediate forecast and think about that bigger picture.
Well, thank you for sharing this forecast with us today and allowing us to really dig into the details of Toronto's rather eventful April 2nd weather. We hope this deep dive has given you a much clearer, more insightful understanding of what to expect.
We certainly hope so. And as we've seen today, even familiar patterns like spring weather can hold some surprising and significant twists. Stay safe out there and be prepared for a truly dynamic day.